Well, I guess, I mean, you've been there now for a week, Chris, with the CDR30, with the CDR Pavilion. Um, I will start maybe with a bit controversial question. It's a huge undertaking, organizing the pavilion and organizing the funding and all of it, and it's not a cheap activity at all. Is it worth it? I've heard pros and cons. Some say this money will be better spent elsewhere. Others say that no, this is what we should be doing. What's your take based on the first week?
I think it's worth it. We've produced this pavilion, or we will have produced this pavilion and the associated kind of event for less than 250,000 euros. Um, and and I think that that kind of budget is it's not crazy, especially if it's shared amongst a large group of organizations, which it is. And I think that the benefits are massive, and happy to talk through those with you. But um, so I think it is worth it. But you're
What are
more
you seeing?
skeptical.
Because like from here, I'm seeing that there's been some interesting press about carbon removal. There's been a letter by many leading scientists calling for a rapid scale up of carbon removal. And yeah, I'm like I've seen much more mainstream activity and coverage of carbon removal during COP. What I don't know is to which extent that's actually translating to action on the ground. So yeah, what have you seen on in Berlin?
Yeah, so that Johan Rockström's intervention, I think, was garnered a lot of attention. There's certainly a buzz here that I don't think I felt when I was in Baku, because that was the only other COP that I've been to. I was only there for 4 days or something, and I've been here for a week. But um, my impression is that carbon removals is beginning to cut through. There's still a lot of work to do, but I feel like there's a buzz. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'll want to talk to me about the pavilion, and I can tell you what role the pavilion plays in that. But um, I think in general, we're feeling like there's the beginnings of something here.
What are some of the proof points you're seeing for that? Like, what are some of the discussions you had or things you saw or heard that make you feel that it's cutting through?
Well, so for the first time, it's CDR is on the action agenda. So we've been working with Chris Neidl, Chris,
Yeah, he's been on
on
the show as well. Yeah.
yeah, on getting that into the climate champions and the action agenda of COP itself. Um, and so I think that based on what I'm hearing from Chris, there's going to be this is not going to be a one-off. It's going to be, carbon removals is going to be permanently part of the COP scene from now on in terms of the documentation that goes into it, the plans, the discussions, the agenda. So I think that's, having had Chris do that this year, I think has been, I think transformational in terms of COP as an event series. Um, but yeah, as a community, I think we're also moving forward in a new way.
Hmm. Well, let's get to like the big question in front of us because you're the man behind the pavilion, right? So you're the one to whom to ask the question, what role has it played to date at COP, and like what do you expect it to still deliver in the days that are still ahead of us during COP30?
So actually, I am one of the people behind the pavilion. There are a lot of women behind the pavilion as well, not just men. And I'm only one of those men. So I would just want to say thank you to Beatrice Beccari Barreto and Alina Toporash, who are the kind of co-leads for what's going on here on the ground. I want to, also mention the people who went before them. So Ben Todd and Marlus Tyrrell, who both were project managers for a while before. And we've also got Anna Atanasova, who's doing the kind of the virtual pavilion side of things. So there's a whole, and plus all the people in the coalition. So the 180 different organizations in this coalition, and everyone's provided something, right? Some content or some ideas or some money. So there's a huge, huge effort. But to answer your question, so I think there are three things. So one is that the pavilion is obviously a place to catch people who are walking past. It's a place to send people if you're talking about carbon removals elsewhere, and that kind of place to educate an audience about carbon removals in a kind of sustained manner just didn't exist at previous COPs, wasn't there. If you wanted to teach someone about carbon removals or have an exchange of views with someone, you'd have to find a person and you'd have to be in a corridor somewhere. And now there's a focus, there's a place. Meet you at the pavilion. And the second thing is that the pavilion has multiplied by a factor of, I don't know, 5 or 6, the amount of carbon removals programming that's happening at COP. So you could always go to the Finnish pavilion, the German pavilion, the science pavilion, the oceans pavilion. You can always find carbon removal programming happening at COP. But it's maybe, 2 sessions a day happening somewhere in the blue zone. And what we have here is just just a much larger volume of stuff happening, and therefore critical mass of content being produced, and that's obviously content that's being produced here, but then is also being filmed and is then put online and distributed. So we're just multiplying the amount of content that's COP related. And the third thing is that it's a hub for the community, right? So it used to be the COP community would come here and there'd be like a WhatsApp group and people would meet up for dinner, and there might be people would run into each other in the blue zone, but there wasn't like a focal point. And the pavilion has created a place where if you're a carbon removals person, you can come and drop your laptop, leave your bag, leave your suit and go and get changed. It's a place that you come back to once you've gone to do your stuff. It's like a home base for the carbon removals community. And that's massive because it creates a sense of community, a sense of belonging to, it's like a home. You go there and you feel at home, and you're able to interact with people in a way that you wouldn't otherwise, in a sort of centralized
Chris,
manner.
if I can ask you one thing that is just based on the conversation with Chris Neidl, if I just kind of playing devil's advocate here, because what he said, which I really liked, is that in the action agenda, he didn't want to have a carbon removal specific point. He said it has to be cross-cutting, right? It has to be embedded everywhere. And when you describe like the community point, I totally get. But when you're describing that before, kind of, we almost had to force our way. We had to force carbon removal into the Finnish pavilion, into the German pavilion, into all these different places, right? Which sounds a bit more cross-cutting to me than having a centralized place. Do you feel that now the conversations are maybe happening less in other fora because we have the centralized place?
I think it'd be interesting to do some statistical analysis of that and maybe look at the COP programs from previous years. I don't see any evidence of that right now. I think the kind of cross-cutting, or let's say the integration agenda, is a key message that we're really pushing very hard. So this is now no longer about carbon removals as a new industry. It's about carbon removals being something that you do as part of steelmaking, as part of wastewater treatment, as part of construction, as part of agriculture, and a million other industries. And that is, I think, still very much, there's still plenty of other stuff going on at COP elsewhere. Cities, there's a cities agenda, buildings agenda. So I think it's still happening. I don't think we've undermined anything like that.
What I really enjoyed hearing from you was that you're recording a lot of content there, and that's something that also is then shared online, because one of the big challenges at COPs when you have a pavilion is that it's one of hundreds of pavilions, and it's very challenging to get people to come and attend the events that you're doing, because at the same time you have tens and tens of events happening. And I mean, those who have been to the Blue Zone in other COPs, they know how often they see side events happening where you basically just have the speakers and the few organizers in the room and no one else, because it's just impossible to get the attention. Like what have you been doing to stand out and to get these, to kind of cut through the noise? Because that's the biggest challenge, right? Everything is happening at the same time. Yes, there are many people, but everyone is trying to reach them.
Yeah, so we've had sessions that have been very quiet, 2, 3 members in the audience, and we've had sessions where it was standing room only. So in terms of, what you can do to make it as popular as possible, one thing is to get high-level speakers. We had California State Senator Josh Becker, and, you had we have 15 chairs in the pavilion, and there were probably every chair was taken plus another 20 people hanging out at the entrance to the pavilion, kind of looking over to see if they could catch sight of Josh Becker. So I think, high level people, interesting content. We've had a number of kind of standing room only sessions. But yeah, I think you're right. We also need to be recording this and then putting it out on the web. And there's a whole kind of YouTube channel now for all that stuff. So yeah, the other thing that we're doing is that we've created a calendar on the CDR30 website, which has the programming of our pavilion. It's got the virtual pavilion as well. So all the things that we are organizing and the community's organizing online at the same time. And then we've also integrated all the other programming that's happening at other parts of COP in other pavilions. So you can filter by those 3 categories and see, you see everything that's happening on carbon removals at COP, at least the stuff that we're aware of. And yeah, hopefully that's useful for people. I don't know if that answers your question.
Chris, what's success for CDR30, but also for CDR generally at COP? Like, how do you measure success if in a couple of weeks we look back?
Yeah, so I think massive success is just having produced the pavilion and making it making it full of content and people starting to talk about it. So that's never happened before. That's a first, and that's something that we'll build on. So that's success already. I think success for the CDR community is getting CDR into the action agenda. It's getting CDR into NDCs. It's getting CDR into, just the high level political discussions that are happening on climate, which it hasn't been until today. And now I think, this year is probably starting to cut through baby steps, so I think it's already been successful, and we've got another week still to go, right? The European Parliament delegation is only arriving today, I think, and plenty more people, particularly from governments, who are coming for this second week. So a lot of potential still.
If I can ask you the same question, because I'm curious, what do you
Success
think?
for CDR at
what do you think?
COP30.
I think it's
What do you want me to do?
mainstreaming CDR. I mean, that's the big one. I do hope that the pavilion is helping with it. Of course, this is also something where the negotiators from different countries, or as they are called in the negotiations, parties, the party negotiators. It's important that they, from their own respective countries, have the positions where they are trying to mainstream CDR into different agenda items at COP. Because the interesting thing is that there is no negotiation agenda item specifically on CDR, because it's just inherently part of the Paris Agreement, and it's inherently part of achieving the temperature goal. But oftentimes it just doesn't get the recognition, or it's kind of an afterthought, or it just gets mentioned next to point source CCS, and oftentimes it just gets mentioned one or two CDR methods and not all of them. I hope that this time around is better, but the challenge is, of course, that's preparing for the success at COP or delivering that success. It doesn't start at COP. It's basically the year leading up to the COP. So that, for example, success of COP31 is something that will be determined during the year now that starts after this COP is over. And I hope that more and more negotiators have the understanding and the support from the governments to be more specific when it comes to establishing different rules and especially when it comes to implementation of the Paris Agreement, right? It's the implementation COP that we are implementing everything also around CDR next to everything else. But I'm curious, how has the pavilion, do you have some examples how the pavilion has helped with mainstreaming CDR at this point? It's obviously, it's always a bigger challenge to just try to do it already at the spots because it's kind of, that's the last point of doing things. I think the good example or parallel is like in the EU policy negotiations. Ideally, you want your ideas to be part of the Commission proposal. If you are only starting to introduce them afterwards, you always have a harder time. And so in this case, also, we're at the point where everything is already going on, but now we're still trying to use this pavilion to make the most of it. Any good examples?
I think one interesting one is NDCs. So we've discovered there's an NDC partnership organization, which is there to help developing countries develop NDCs, and we would love to mainstream CDR by getting any country developing NDCs to include CDR. And we were able to go by the pavilion of the NDC partnership and talk to them about carbon rules, and then not just walk away and disappear and be unfindable for the rest of the 2 weeks, but actually say, why don't you discuss that with your team and then come and see us at the CDR Pavilion. We're there all the time. There's always someone there. Come by and talk to us. And so it's this ability to sustain communication with people who are mainstreaming or can mainstream CDR, who are in a position to bring CDR into that kind of mainstreaming policy, because you've got a qualitatively different kind of presence.
Yeah. Sebastian, I'm curious now, right back at you. What is success for you? Because you are very data driven to the extent that I know, and it's probably quite challenging to put numbers to, the presence at COP and really measure the outcome. What are you looking for?
So for me, again, the goal is the same that you mentioned. It's how do we mainstream CDR? And again, I thought that the fact that The Guardian put, let's say, a neutral to positive article on carbon removal on its as a headline on its front page during COP, for me, that was a huge success. That for me is what mainstreaming CDR means. The letter by these hundreds of scientists, including Johan Rockström, and what he specifically called for, and for me that would be the ultimate success, is that the COP presidency includes the need for rapid scale-up of engineered carbon removals into its final declaration. That for me would be the big win for carbon removal. And again, they have specifically called for it. This is not coming from the CDR community. This is coming from one of the top climate scientists globally. But yeah, I think it's already been a great success in the mainstreaming process. But that kind of inclusion in the final declaration, I think, would be the cherry on the cake.
So I just want to also add, so mainstreaming, that's all government and policymaker focused thinking, right? And that is one of the two key types of objectives that we have for COP. I think the way I look at the second objective is we have the attention of the world's media on climate for 2 weeks every year. And it would be a waste of money to try and talk to the world's media about CDR during the rest of the year and not make use of this opportunity that we have here, right? So, like, this is the most cost-efficient way to interact with the world's media. I don't know how many interviews I've done this week just because a journalist walked past or found out about the pavilion, came by and said, "Can we do an interview?" I've done, I don't know, 5 or 6, and that opportunity to reach global audiences is really important not to waste as well. And I think that's also part of the success we're having.
It's awesome. Oh, Eva, did you want to say something?
Let's see what question you have, Sebastian. For me, it will be digging deeper into something we already discussed. So let's see if you
I
have
have
any angle.
this COP is held for the first time in a while in a proper democracy. And I think a lot of the news headlines have been around, at least what reached us here outside of COP, is around the protest by indigenous people in front of COP, right? And I've been following this and reading into it. And I was interested actually to see that once you dig below the surface, the presidency has done a lot to include indigenous people, but clearly not enough, or some people are still very disappointed, but they did way more than anyone in the last COPs to try to include indigenous people, right? But my question is kind of, carbon removal is also affecting indigenous communities a lot, right? It's often done on indigenous lands. I went to Bolivia to ExoMod's project. All the biochars applied on indigenous lands there. So it is an important component for the carbon removal discussion. So given that's kind of taken all the headlines, I'm wondering, has that fed into the discussions in the pavilion and the discussions you've been having, or is this very much something that's kind of been happening in a different area of the COP?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So there's a massive presence of indigenous people here. So you see people with feathered hats or feathered headdresses walking around everywhere, painted bodies, painted faces. So the Brazilian indigenous community is here in large numbers inside the blue zone. And that's something I obviously didn't see in Baku. And apparently Brazilians have provided a very large number of blue zone badges to indigenous community
1,500 I
organizations.
read. It's a lot.
So it's a lot, and you can feel that in as you walk around. I was there when the protests. I was literally about to walk out of the blue zone when the protesters broke down the doors and broke in, and it was quite scary for a moment. And I think there was a lot of security, a lot of criticisms to be made of the Brazilians and how they organize security. But since that happened last week, the kind of army presence and the perimeter has been widened. And it's really very, very big security presence outside of COP right now. So they will allow these protests, but they'll have, it'll be much more controlled than it was when they broke in. I was at a session at the Singapore Pavilion yesterday where a lady who said she was representing indigenous communities spoke up against nature-based carbon removals and said that they were essentially auctioning off indigenous people's lands for commercial profit. And it was a little bit weird to me because I felt like, first of all, I hadn't seen her at the beginning of the session, so I felt like she might have just come in with some kind of prepared statement or complaint. And secondly, it was quite clear from the things that people had said on the panel that there was no auctioning of any lands. In fact, that the models that were being discussed were all putting money into the communities, and the vast majority of the not just agricultural benefits, but also the monetary benefits were going to the local communities in all cases. So I felt like this particular person, was not kind of she wasn't genuinely criticizing the thing. She was just, I felt like she was just there to make her presence felt rather than to have a sort of a properly legitimate complaint. And interestingly, one of the people on the stage was doing a project, a soil carbon project in Peru, and invited an indigenous Peruvian who was in the room to stand up and talk about the benefits to his community from that project. And essentially, he was so kind of eloquent that he basically he spoke Spanish and had to be interpreted, but he essentially silenced her, and I could tell that there was this kind of tension between her and him, and she looked at him like with suspicion, and so I think there's some complicated things happening here with regards to indigenous people and their rights and how they're represented here, who they're sending, and the noise that's being made and what's actually behind that. So I think it's not as simple as it first appears.
It's maybe an idea for a future session in the CDR Pavilion, right? Could be an interesting one to also do the impact of carbon removal on indigenous lands, because there's many case studies now already around the world. But yeah, Eve, where did you want to go next?
I'm curious. I'm sure, Chris, you came to this COP and you had some expectations what you wanted to see. And was there anything that surprised you when it came to CDR at COP? Anything that stands out that's kind of, took you by surprise?
Not really. I mean, I've been preparing this for such a long time that I was, aware of what NIDL was doing and aware of what the programming was going to be in the pavilion and aware of who was coming. So I wouldn't say I'm surprised, except that I'm just impressed at how things have worked. And so I wouldn't say surprised, but I'm very pleased with the way that things have happened. And maybe just add one thing, which is the party. We had a big party, a CDR30 party, which we hosted in a glass building in the botanical gardens by the riverbanks on Saturday night, and it was extremely well attended. We had an event rapper do a rap about carbon removals, which was great, and we had people who were not from the CDR community attend, and government officials and journalists, and we went late into the night, and it was a really great party, fantastic venue, super food, great drinks and service, etc. And one of the things that a member of our community was saying to me was, you have to have the best party at COP, and once you have the best party at COP, you get a reputation for that, and then it starts to raise the profile of who you are. So I don't know if we had the best party at COP, but it was pretty darn good, and that will hopefully be something that we can repeat. And I think that's great, is that I think this community has the kind of culturally has the potential to really be impactful, because it's full of optimistic, positive people who are really trying to change the world. And I think we that comes across when you meet us.
So we're at time, but yes and no answer. I guess it's an obvious yes, given the the segue you just provided. COP31. There's going to be CDR COP31. Sorry, CDR31
For sure.
Pavilion. Sure. Good to know. Let's get prepared.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Chris. Show them how fun CDR people can be, if this is what it takes to make CDR success there. And thanks for holding up the flag.
Ain't no party like a CDR party, according to the rappers. So there you go.
Excellent. All right. Great. Have a good one. Say hi to everyone.
You too.
Bye, Chris.
Bye. See you guys. Bye.